government has its eyes set on the 5G spectrum auction that should take place in October this year. The telecom spectrum for civilian use was coveted in India till the recent past. Telecom operators would pay high top dollars to acquire the limited space offered to them. But recent history has proven otherwise. The last 4G spectrum auction saw very few takers. Market dynamics have changed with fewer operators and the price war leaving the existing players bruised. So will the new technology be enough bait for the operators to pay the monies that the government is expecting? And do the players have the financial strength to spend more on these spectrums? Let's put that question across to Sanjay Kapoor. He's industry expert and former CEO of Airtel, who joins us from Delhi. And of course, here in our studios is the co-head of research at SBICap Securities, Rajiv Sharma. Gentlemen, both of you, good morning. Thanks much for joining in. Sanjay, let's start off with you. Telcos have learned a lesson or two in the last 5 or 6 years. Don't go out and bid at any price, because eventually, if there are no bidders, the prices come off. From whatever little we understand, the prices, the reserve prices for the 5G, the initial auction, are very high, more high than what the telcos would have imagined. Do you reckon that there will be a lackluster response to this auction when it happens in October?
So Neeraj, I can only begin by trying to demystify the 5G dilemma. You know, at the end of the day, 5G is yet another technology which comes into fray with three very large differentiators. It's a very high-speed internet. It provides you low latency, and it provides you a capability of dealing with Internet of Things, which means a network which has got many devices in a concentrated area, which probably 4G cannot deal with as well. Now, given this backdrop, very clearly, 5G is a technology that is going to rely very heavily on use cases. And these use cases will be more in the B2B space than into the B2C space. And bulk of the telcos that you see around the world are B2C players over time by practice and by revenues and valuations that they've created. They're not necessarily B2B players, but this is a swing which will lead them to behave like B2B players and develop use cases which they will be able to monetize on this technology. The issue that the world is facing, like previous times, is the infrastructure providers are leading this new zest around this technology, because it's always the infrastructure technology that leads the terminals technology in the telecom game. And devices are always lagged compared to the infrastructure technology. Now, given this as a backdrop, countries like India will struggle a bit to develop use cases around monetizable economics. And that is the big challenge that the industry will face. Industry that is already bruised with the tariffs and low tariffs and high investment in the industry. 4G is not fully leveraged. You and I are fully aware that our networks are not video ready. When we even try to live stream simple things or make internet calls on road, there is trouble. It's not that we have contiguous networks, which can carry and serve, any type of video streaming, as we move along. So I think given all that, given very poor balance sheets, and given the fact that the ability to invest in a new technology and actually build up use cases, which are B2B based use cases, I think seems to be a challenge per se. And therefore, to invest heavily behind the spectrum for that technology is not easy. All those operators in Japan, in Korea, in the Gulf, who've invested behind these and also US, who've invested behind these technologies, are still testing the waters. They've not, actually dived deep into the game as yet. So I think India will take some time before it's ready for 5G, and our balance sheets at the moment are so weak that I think it should take a little longer than what will take the rest of the world, is my opinion.
So, to that point then, Sanjay, what makes the TRAI so confident that they have kept the pricing for 5G spectrum auctions at such elevated levels, and that there are going to be any sort of participants at those levels? I mean, about 500 crores per megahertz, that's a bit much.
At the end of the day, from a TRAI perspective, a spectrum is a spectrum is a spectrum. And most of the spectrum is fungible today. It is not married to a technology. So there can't be an arbitrage that I sell 5G technology cheaper than 4G because it can be reformed into doing something else as well. So I think from that perspective, they have to maintain a decorum and have a pricing. But the fact is that given the current situation and given that operators are still playing a catch-up game on the 4G, I think the appetite for more spectrum for 5G and transforming their networks to 5G should be a low appetite, sort of a game at the moment.
What do you think, Rajiv? Do you concur? And the fact that we've seen this historically as well, even in 2016, the last auction, the 700 megahertz band remained unsold. I mean, there is no appetite to pay this kind of money.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at the last auction, only 40% of the spectrum which was put to auction got sold, and rest remain idle, as you rightly point, 700. So the prices really have to drop, and we believe if they drop by 30%, then there is take up. But it's very difficult for a regulator to come out with a recommendation that, okay, it goes down by 15 or 20%. We will have one or two auctions where there will be no take up and everybody goes back to the drawing board, revisits the pricing, the regulator in particular, and you will see then selective interest coming in 5G. It is just not about spectrum. 4G you could do with less of fiber backhaul, but 5G is about incremental towers, a lot of densification, and increased and huge investments in backhaul, fiber backhaul. So the regulator needs to take in consideration the total cost of ownership or total cost of rollout for the telcos. It is just not spectrum pricing alone. And look at investments of $40 billion made by Jio in 4G. You just started rolling out. You're still FCF negative. You'll have to first ensure that 4G gets profitable before you plunge into 5G. And what did the magic? The Jio phone, the Jio's feature phone. It will take 3-5 years to get there to Jio feature phone. So how do you drive mass market? And B2B, that's not, as Sanjay rightly points out, that's not really into the DNA of telcos today. They even in their enterprise business, they're doing mostly bulk connectivity business. So to get to that, it'll take a lot of time. They'll have to. It'll take a lot of time. They'll have to work with the IT, companies. They have to behave like IT companies. It doesn't happen overnight.
So what do you reckon? That lack of participation, maybe Circle B, Circle C, some nibbling in by Jio and Bharti because they would want to be seen as early mover players?
There are two things to it. One is obviously, there is a possibility that you take a couple of cheaper price circles so that you keep getting ready for 5G as and when the prices become very favorable and the ecosystem starts maturing. And China could surprise next year. There's a huge Huawei issue which is going on. If they can come out with cheaper 5G, China, trying to subsidize that for the mass take-up in other parts of the world, then maybe things change for 5G. So we'll see Bharti, Jio in particular, picking up a couple of circles like Northeast, Assam or something, so that they are getting ready for 5G. The second is what Airtel is doing with Airtel Thanks. They are bundling a lot of content there. So, to remain viable, let's say it becomes a big story and it becomes a big ARPU mover, in that case, there'll be some kind of subtle pressure on Airtel that, okay, in our top CBD markets, we should do something around 5G so that we can retain these Netflix guys, the Amazon guys, because Airtel is now got this segmentation right, and if it starts paying off, then there will be a subtle pressure.
In fact, Mr. Kapoor, just to take that point forward, I mean, Rajiv spoke about Airtel, and they're keen to get about 100 million subscribers on their Airtel Thanks program. Do you feel that Airtel, though a little bit stretched with regards to the balance sheet, looking at bringing down overall debt, finding sources of monetization, could still be a bigger bidder?
There's again a big dilemma on how to make money out of this content play. At the end of the day, every operator wants to be a smart pipe given a choice over being a dumb pipe. And I think Airtel is trying to do that as well. The fact of the matter is that bulk of the content providers across the globe don't make money out of access. And operators have only an access revenue share opportunity with such like guys. They themselves don't make money out of excess. How will the operator make money out of access? Most of these guys make money out of their valuations, right? And many of them have gone publicly and said, we are not going to make profit for a long time. So I think given that dilemma, even if you bundle content, even if you get 100 million customers, the issue is how will you make money doing that? Because there's lots of bandwidth you're putting in place. There's a lot of capability you're putting in place. There's a lot of customer experience you're driving. And all this costs money. Like Rajiv said, this is not about the cost of spectrum alone. There are electronics, there's backhaul, there's a play with devices, there's a play with storage, there's a play with security, and there's the whole 9 yards. And to stitch that 9 yards, it takes a lot of investments, and the current returns probably don't justify that. So I don't think the delight ever will be around 100 million customers. The delight will really come to say, how do I make money and how do I turn the table? Now, given that, will you go and bid even in smaller circles for 5G? What will you do with it? You see, we've all grown up laying out our networks after getting a spectrum band, say 2G, 3G, 4G, and then doing a carpet rollout of that network across the country. Because we hoped that on a B2C play, there are customers who will come in and take up the network and build their own use cases and content as we grow. Unfortunately, 5G does not follow the same norm. 5G is around use cases. People talk about autonomous cars. Are autonomous cars going to happen here tomorrow, right? And if there are autonomous cars, who will pay for it? And if there's any other industrial case which is there, and you go and put a network around an industry, right? Will the industry pay you, $10 million a month to recover your costs? So those are the things which are going to put a question mark on, should I bid for this spectrum or not bid for this spectrum? There are others who believe that we can go and provide this as a backhaul technology, which means I carry and fire into a building from outside through a tower using 5G, and internal give a Wi-Fi access to the guy, which means I'm backhauling on a 5G technology. Now, this is an access technology. This is not a backhaul technology. I'm afraid we tried that in 4G as well to begin with, to say we will have a nomadic network and we will offer a fixed wireless. It did not work. So my guess is that unless and until India truly has monetizable use cases around 5G, to bid for 5G spectrum will just be a tick in the box. And I'm sure there'll be some ticks in the box as well. The government ideally should give some spectrum away to the operators on a trial period for about a year or so, and allow them to experiment with use cases. I think that'll be a better driver of economics as we move forward than make them invest more money behind spectrum, lock up their capital for a technology which may not have a return in the short run.
The telcos are super rich, Sanjay. Super rich don't get benefits these days. The question, though, is this, and if that is indeed your view and Rajiv's view as well, do you guys reckon that this rollout of any meaningful rollout, not a test case rollout, but a meaningful rollout, is a few quarters away? I mean, if this spectrum auction, as you guys believe, will not find enough bidders, then you see the bidding only happening a few quarters down the line, then some rollouts, then some meaningful cases which get built around it. Are we looking at 2 years safely? So, Sanjay, the question is to you and then to Rajiv, but to you first.
Yeah, all right. So, I hate to crystal ball gaze, but on this one, on this one, you may not be wrong with your 2-year mark. In fact, if I was to call it, I would call it a period longer than 3 years. It'll take at least 3 to 4 years for India to start thinking 5G and put in real serious money behind it, which can be monetized. I think 2 years is too short a period. The problems of 4G are not going to go away in the next 2 years.
Your thoughts, and therefore, would the prices necessarily come down quicker than that 2-year timeline or 3-year timeline that you may be believing in, Rajiv?
So if you look at the budget document, government is only projecting 20% growth in revenues, increased revenue from telecom sector, which is to do with the proceeds coming from 2016 spectrum auction, as there was a moratorium. So very clearly, what does it mean is that next 3-4 quarters, government is also not very hopeful about this auction going through. So yes, it could take a longer time. But two things which I'll watch out is next year, what China does with its 5G rollout. Do they accelerate to go mass market on 5G? Because there's a lot of debate around Huawei, and they would like to fix that up. Second is what happens with FWA, which is fixed wireless, which Verizon is doing in US, because Jio is also trying to do FTTH. If FWA economics work out better, then there could be a revisit from Jio's perspective on 5G, and if Jio is willing to participate more on 5G, then 5G could take up. So these are the two variables, though China factor is the larger variable. And I believe prices will have to come down. What telcos may pick up in auction is 4G spectrum, which is 2300. They may pick that up because everything is ready. You just need to add spectrum, and you get some capacity advantage. That may happen.
Okay. Nonetheless, obviously, since we've been talking about Huawei, the overall capex spends also for all of these players, if they want to, get into the fray of 5G, will increase almost 10% plus if Huawei is banned.
Yeah. So we highlighted this in our report that it's a three-player market today. This vendor market, the telecom vendor market, and if one is out, then you're left with Nokia and Ericsson. Now, unless Samsung decides to join this club, which they have, said that they will be interested, then you will not see much of pricing pressure coming from the vendors. Otherwise, there would have been some kind of capex increase on the pricing side, because it would have become a two-player market.
All right, double whammy of sorts then. Thank you so very much, Rajiv, as well as Sanjay. Really appreciate the both of you joining in on this discussion, a very insightful one at that. But the markets, a little bit of a seesaw there. We've seen the index open higher, then go down almost 0.25%, now back into the green for the Nifty 50.
Well, wrap it up on this leg of Indian Open from Devina and me and the team that put this show together. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned. The FNO show takes forward the action on the other side.